watching people make these moves, like when we were watching them in the House of Commons vote like against the non-confidence, you cannot look at things simply layered as if genuinely think this is about his pension.
Welcome back to Northern Perspective, everyone. I'm Cypher.
And I'm Fox.
So we're recapping this week because a lot happened. We had our long-anticipated interviews with our four members of Parliament, Stephanie Kuzy, Larry Brock, and Kelly Block.
And Garnet Jennis.
And we also had quite the live stream with David Yo man, as Brock was saying on the committee hearing. And we also had a attempt at the Conservatives to deny the April 1st carbon tax increase, which did not fly. And we also had a non-confidence vote by the Conservatives, which did not move forward. So there was a lot of things strategically that played out. There was some disappointment for Canadians across the country as these events took place, and we wanted to try and talk about that, reflect on that, and see if we can unpack some more of the reasons of why they did that. You heard a bit of a take from Fox and I the other night, so we figured it would probably be fun, as much as politics is fun for everybody, to unpack this with one of our previous guests, Vesper. So without further ado, let's welcome Vesper back to the show. Welcome aboard, Vesper.
What's up, guys? Nice to be back. Thanks for having me.
Thanks for coming.
So, we touch base periodically on things political. What was your roller coaster this week? We saw it was your birthday on Twitter.
That went well.
Yeah,
that went well.
This could have been the best birthday present ever, but
I wanted my birthday to be Canada's birthday.
Well, then that would be July 1st, my friend. But you wanted Canada to have an early birthday present, no doubt. So what was your take on what happened this week?
So you're not wrong. Look, I'm gonna try to bring some levity to this, but to be quite frank, it was a mixed bag of confusion, strategy, and a little bit of irritation, to be completely honest with you, because as you both know, I work in the sector of communication, marketing, design, and I've helped with some companies in their consultation on what is the most efficacious way to bring about a message. And watching the non-confidence, let's call it this whole thing that happened, I have a few comments on this, but I'm also eager to hear, your responses to what I think about this and where this could potentially go. But yeah, overall, I'd say it was a cluster of emotions. Let's put it that way, because on one hand, it seemed to just come out of nowhere, which is always a good strategy if you're, in combat, the element of surprise. What kind of really threw me off is the way it was communicated, and we can get into that a little bit more. So I'll leave it there for now, as you guys, allude to this situation.
Yeah, it's we were hopeful. I think we were more hopeful than expecting the positive outcome that Canada wanted, and but it's interesting, just from a strategic point of view. I keep seeing Jagmeet play the wrong moves, and I don't know if they are ignoring the polls. I don't know if they are looking at the polls and surmising that there's going to be a different outcome, or there's different reasons. They should have taken a look at the Durham by-election and seen that the estimated polls were actually wrong by half, meaning that the NDP were supposed to get about 20% of the vote in the Durham election. That was what it was projected, and they only garnered about 10. So if they take that and extrapolate that across the country, that means that when it comes time to vote, then it's a possibility that people actually abandon the NDP and go and vote with the Liberals. So that should be very concerning for NDP voters and everybody who's an NDP MP. So when you take a look at what he's done, he bet it all on the pharmacare quote unquote bill, and ended up extending a deadline and even changing the criteria of that deadline from December 31st of 2023 to March 1st of this year. So it changed from the bill had to be passed to the bill had to be tabled, and even that bill wasn't even what is specified in the supply and confidence agreement. So technically, the Liberals are in breach of that agreement. Yet Jagmeet is still moving ahead with it. So he had an opportunity to terminate it there and stand up and get everybody riled up and ride off into the campaign sunset. And then they had another opportunity when the Liberals tabled this bill and said, no, this is nothing like we agreed to, we've been lied to, and done the same thing. And then he had a third opportunity with the carbon tax and the non-confidence vote, which it wasn't too surprising because they are for a carbon tax. But at this point, he has one final shot to actually salvage his party's electoral chances before the boundary change, and it isn't even that great of a shot anymore because he's bungled this up so much.
Yeah, but I get the feeling that Jagmeet only cares about Jagmeet. He doesn't care about the party. He doesn't care about Canadians. He's just going to do whatever he wants to do until he doesn't want to do it anymore.
And this is where I think Canadians need to actually stop targeting Jagmeet with questions and letters, and start directing that to the actual caucus of the NDP, because they're the ones that are going to be left to pick up the pieces. So if everybody is correct in that Jagmeet doesn't care about anybody but Jagmeet, he's only interested in his pension, then what that means is he's willing to take the NDP party down to 0 seats if he must, in order to get his pension. So that go ahead.
And I gotta interject, because this is precisely where I refuse to believe that he is that stupid. And I don't think the president of the NDP or the people that are in his caucus are that stupid either. You know, watching people make these moves, like when we were watching them in the House of Commons vote like against the non-confidence, you cannot look at things simply layered as if they genuinely think this is about his pension, because It's not. Right. And that's the problem here, is that there is an obvious play here that's going on that we just don't see in the background. And for the NDP, forget Jagmeet. We're not even going to refer to Jagmeet anymore. The NDP itself has a play that they're banking on. And I'm assuming you've elaborated on this multiple times on your show. The erosion for me in this whole thing was what the CPC felt like they needed to stand on, knowing full well that they were going to face basically opposition. Quite frankly, it was to my own miscalculation, but the fact that the Bloc went against it kind of got to me. At first, I was like, okay, you're really going to hammer this down through repetition. So that's a marketing ploy that wants to repeat, he's not worth the cost, axe the tax. Every MP kept saying he's not worth the cost, axe the tax. There's a problem with that for me, because initially I was like, really? This government has done way worse than just this. There's a variety of ways that you could highlight. In fact, the Bloc actually highlighted some of those things in committee when it came to the Liberals. But for some reason, the CPC stayed on this tax. And initially I was like, okay, I've heard the interview you had with the MPs, which was stellar, by the way. All of them are clearly very intelligent people. And Pierre is a very intelligent person. I was kind of torn. I'm like, is the comms team for the CPC thinking that by repeating this, that this is what's going to like make the non-confidence work? Because it clearly didn't. And even for me, it began to become like, okay, it's too obvious that you're doing this. Once it was over and the vote ended, from a strategic point of view, I had two choices. If I was in a boardroom helping, I'd either conclude that you have terrible strategists, which is I don't believe, or you are kind of setting this person up like with we tried to tell you, but you didn't want to listen. That was the only other solution I could go to, because I cannot accept that the communications for the CPC, which has been remarkable up until this point, would only hammer on that one main topic. I don't know if you guys felt the same way.
Yeah, it's a little surprising in a way. My initial thought is, well, the reason that they probably did that is because the carbon tax is something that is most relatable to Canadians in terms of cost of living. What I would have liked them to do is to talk about ArriveCan, talk about the SDTC scandal, talk about these other, even bring in the $8 million
Housing.
barn. Yeah, housing. Everything.
Housing.
Now Pierre did touch on that, but you never heard it again throughout the day of debate. So they could have talked about all of those things and then related it back to affordability, which is Canadians' primary concern, and it would have allowed them to continue to push and hammer on these other scandals as well. So I was a little surprised they didn't do that. In terms of the motivations, I think it was fairly obvious by the end of it that they didn't anticipate that this was going to pass. But I think what they were calculating on is the fact that Easter is April 1st, this year, and the vote was essentially going to carry them into the 2 weeks of constituency week leading into Easter. I'm guessing they wanted to try to unite the public resistance to government so that when these MPs all went back to their ridings, they had a lot of angry people to answer to, because as we saw, 70% of Canadians don't want the increase to the carbon tax. 70% of Canadians, I believe, in totality, don't even want the carbon tax now. And you have 7 out of 10 premiers who have constituents so angry at them that they have called a pause to the carbon tax. So you have all of these Canadians that are ready and waiting for these MPs to come back to their ridings, and they're going to say, hey, what the heck was that?
Well, I mean, this is where the crux is, right? So looking at this in the most professional way, like let's forget emotions for a second. If the carbon tax is the main thing for this non-confidence, that would imply that most Canadians believe that it's all hinged on this extra tax that's being levied over the tax.
Well, I think it's more of they don't want anything. Everything is bad and they can't handle it as it is. They don't want more added on. That's probably what it is.
Well, but see, then this is so okay. I gotta qualify this. Typically, when you're going to use repetitious point making in marketing, it really came off like a marketing plan in the House of Commons that day. And there's a few things that people need to know about when we use repetition in trying to convince an audience. Define your core message. They've already defined it clearly. Use consistent language. That's point 2. They're very consistent, too consistent. Visuals. Well, we've been watching the Twitter and YouTube stuff that the CPC is dropping. Where I felt that they could have done better was maybe use a variety of formats in the way of expressing why this is such a important point to hammer home, and why not cover all the scandals, talk a lot more about housing. It came off like a one-trick pony. But see, that's what got me on this cipher. They're not dumb.
Right.
They really aren't. there's a reason why this was done over and over and over. I surmise that you two know a little bit more about what's coming in the next month or two that would justify why it was done this way. Because being repetitive can become a snooze fest. If every MP sounds the same, like at that point, you're just robotic. There's a reason for that. And that's the part where I leave to your expertise in the political realm, because you guys understand this. What's coming in the next few months that would qualify their being so repetitive on this point as being a powerful message? Is it the boundary change? Is it the fact that they're going to go back and people are going to see prices of things go up?
Yeah, I
I have
think
my thoughts,
Canadians
but
are.
I'll let Fox chime in.
I think Canadians are going to see the price on everything go up again. We're supposed to be getting a carbon tax rebate on April 15th, which again, Canadians are going to see, well, I'm paying, X more for my home heating. I'm paying Y more every time I fill up at the pump, but I'm only getting Z more in carbon quote unquote refund. We all know we're paying more into it than we're getting back. There's very few Canadians who will actually be in the green after receiving their rebate checks. And the other thing that's coming the day after that, on April 16th, is the budget.
Well, and what I'm wondering, so a couple things that are happening outside of that. So April 1st is supposed to be a big anti-carbon tax protest. I don't know how big that's going to be, but I see a bit of publicity on it on X for that. And on April 6th, the Conservatives have their planned cross Canada door knocking on the carbon tax. So that's something else. What I wonder is, to your point, they have been very, very strategic up to this point with their communications, with their moves, and you haven't really seen a misstep by them. So what I'm wondering is if they have been too consistent on this on purpose, in that there's going to be a planned shocker of a change in direction out of this. And I don't know if that's relating to SNC-Lavalin. I don't know if that's related to something that's coming for a Rive scam. But it feels like something else is coming that is going to be the anti-narrative to this consistency, this boring mantra that we're hearing, because that, to me, that would be a way of amplifying the shock value of whatever's coming. You know what I mean?
I do, and I think from what I'm hearing every time I hear them say axe the tax, what I'm hearing them say is not necessarily the tax itself is the main problem, is to demonstrate that, and they use this, right? He's out of touch.
Yeah.
The prime minister's out of touch. I think when they keep doing this is what they're saying is we're clearly all in a very big storm of sorts. And rather than going in the opposite way, this government is choosing to continue down this destructive spiral of basically impoverishing Canadians. And I think they're using this carbon thing as saying that, because if you really think about it, I'm assuming, and correct me if I'm wrong, but this really applies more to everything west of Ontario, right? Those are the people that are most impacted by this tax. Am I wrong in saying this?
Well, Ontario, I'd say west of Quebec, because Eastern or Atlantic Canada has been, they have a bit of a carve out in terms of the home heating oil.
Right.
And then everybody else, Quebec has their own system, so this doesn't, impact them. So it's really Ontario and everybody west.
And then how about east of Quebec also? Would we be able to say like the New Brunswick, the Nova Scotia, the Newfoundland?
Well,
is this impacting these people too?
So it is, because the only sector where it's not impacting them is home heating. So when somebody in New Brunswick goes to the pumps on April 1st, they're going to be paying more tax. When somebody in Newfoundland, Nova Scotia, Prince Edward Island, if you know, when they go to the grocery store, they're going to see things more expensive. When they go to Walmart and buy clothes, that's going to be more expensive. Any goods that they buy that travels by any sort of mechanized vehicle is going to be more expensive because of the carbon tax. Sure, you're not going to be seeing that increase on home heating oil, but anyone who heats by natural gas, yeah, you're going to see it.
Yeah, I mean, from my vantage point, this non-confidence on the carbon tax election, this again is a complete either a complete miscalculation on what Canada, because there's so much that's going to happen that you guys have already talked about, and I know and I see all over X. There's a housing bubble that's like we don't know at what day this is going to happen. It's getting to the point where even Pierre Poilievre brought up that like the RCMP apparently said that they have inside intelligence and warns Canadians would revolt once they realize how broke they really are. Like, this is the kind of stuff that I was anticipating, and knowing that Pierre is not that dumb, no disrespect. All these are massive talking points, and he refused to talk about any of this. He hardlined all the MPs in the party on this carbon tax thing. When the boundary changes kick in and when the budget comes out, how's this going to play? I mean, I'm asking you both. How's this going to play with the carbon tax? Isn't that going to be like one of the least worries that we're going to have to worry about at this point?
Well, when the budget comes out, so the budget is presented on the 16th. They're not voting on it then, but it's presented. And that's going to be interesting to me because Jagmeet is going to see is his pharmacare in there? And if it's not, then what do? That means that there's no plan to actually roll out these free contraceptives and these not free contraceptives, these taxpayer-funded contraceptives and taxpayer-funded
diabetes medication.
And, medication. So what do? Like, do you go along with it? Because how do you do that when you said that everyone's going to get their, this stuff quickly? But Freeland was asked repeatedly, is this going to be in there? And she refused to answer. Why would you refuse to answer that? Now, the answer could just be that, well, I'm not going to speak to anything in the budget at all until it's tabled because anything could happen. That would be a reasonable answer. But so the budget's tabled on April 16th. By that point, we're 2 weeks into the carbon tax increase, and then 6 days later, the official boundary changes take effect. And what that also means is all of the polling models completely change as well. So what you may see is a dip in the seats for the NDP. The popular vote's probably going to stay the same because it's still the same people, but the seat counts are probably going to change.
Now this is important because this is where I'm a bit confused. Once the boundary changes happen, and I think we've previously spoken about this and asking you to illuminate me a little bit more. This doesn't mean that this happens live. Once the boundary changes happen, this happens live. This is only after an election, correct? That
So
they take effect.
So on April 22nd is when the new boundary changes come into effect, meaning that right now there's 338 members of parliament. On April 22nd, there's still going to be 338 members of parliament. But the next time we go to election, there's going to be 6 extra, and the riding boundaries are going to be different. Like, for example, we looked up a address of a family member of ours, and her riding is going to be different. She's going to be in a completely different riding than she's in now. She's not moving. It's just the way that the map is changing.
Right, and her MP doesn't change right now, but after the next election, that's when it will change.
That's 2025. This is important. All these are important things for the next election, which is scheduled, I believe, in October 2025. Correct? Okay. Let's talk 2024. beyond scandals, beyond uncovering, because something tells me that the CPC has a few aces in their sleeves that
Yeah,
they're waiting for.
yeah,
And
and to your point, it could be why they didn't bring all of this stuff in to play during that carbon tax, non-confidence debate. They quite obviously did not go all in, right? They
precisely.
So that means that they, to your point, they have they have other contingency plans.
But see, now this is where some people I've heard complain that these types of things are useless. They cost Canadians.
An
At
election.
this point, no, the like doing these non-confidence things, and they take hours, and people have to do this, and
Well, it
was it
does.
necessary?
It doesn't
Are
cost
they
Canadians.
wrong? That's what I was
Yeah,
asking.
they
Are
are
they
wrong, I
wrong?
think, because I mean, if our government was doing what they were supposed to be doing and they were being a good government and putting in good legislation, then yes, absolutely, it would be a waste of time. However, the Trudeau Liberal government is not a good government. They are not putting in good legislation. So, what it's doing is it's taking time away from the Liberals to create legislation, which is harmful towards Canadians right now. And it's taking that time away from them.
And you also saw the same thing on Friday. So after what went on in the House on Wednesday and Thursday, no one really tuned in on Friday. But on Friday, what was going on is, and remember, we get angry at the Liberals when they do this. So all's fair on both sides of the aisle. What the Conservatives were doing all day, and I mean all day, is they were just raising points of order or on nothing to just slow things
Stall.
down.
Yeah,
Yeah,
to
it's to
stall them.
filibuster,
To
exactly.
filibuster. To Fox's point, filibustering is very frustrating when you have someone trying to do something positive, but it can be very helpful for a party to try to stop the governing party or try to stop another party from doing something destructive.
And right now, that's the only tool that the CPC has because the Liberals are acting like a majority government with the support of the NDP. So the NDP obviously are not voting against anything that the Liberals are doing. So the only tool that the Conservatives have is to filibuster.
Right. So, as much as people don't like to see it in committee, when the Liberals are doing it, it's it again, all's fair on both sides of the aisle because it is a tool for parties to use. It's a frustrating tool, it's an exhausting tool, but it's a tool nonetheless. Now, in terms of 2024, so just from a strategic point of view, this is going to be a tough year, and it's going to be interesting to see what the NDP does in terms of their leadership choice. Because as this year goes, put it this way, who do they represent? They represent usually people that are in the lower income scale.
Okay, good. Now you're talking my language because the way I work is I first always study demographics.
Right.
What are we talking about when we talk NDP?
Yeah, so it's the lower income scale. It's people that are also, and these people are not necessarily lower income scale, but the other demographic that they really focus on is unionized people. So anyone who's in a union, they are always encouraged to vote for NDP because the NDP party is the champion of unions. So the issue,
And what kind of age demographic are they mostly? Do we know
It's usually
the breakdown?
younger women, like college age women.
So we're talking under 35 usually.
I would say the vast majority, and then the outliers are going to be the union workers that work in the union all their life. So they're going to be sprinkled throughout all the age demographics,
Right.
and those people are going to be primarily male. So those are your main demographics of NDP. Now the issue is that they are starting to lose some of these people, especially the younger people, just as the Liberals are, because they can't afford anything. They can't afford a house. They're exiting school and they're realizing everything I've been told throughout school is a lie because I can't. Where's my $100,000 a year job? Where is my house? Everything
Well,
has been promised to me.
It's so funny you say that. I was having a conversation today with a friend of mine who happens to be a liberal, and I don't think they're going to be a liberal for long, to be honest, because the argument was there is a point at which ideology meets reality, and reality always wins.
Yes.
And the issue I think that we're dealing with here, because I'm sorry, I'm brazenly open about this. I do think the climate does change. I do not think that this is all about climate change. All these sectors that are being opened up in the green area, let's call it, for everybody to now suddenly care, a la Al Gore, type of end of the world scenarios. If we don't save the planet and save the world, all these things I'm not buying, and I don't think anyone that is in business buys this. In fact, I think the president of I forget if it was the WEF or the World Health Organization. He's from Saudi Arabia. Even he said, like, we're not about to cancel fossil fuels. You want to take us back to the dark ages, to one of the main leaders of that agenda. So for me to watch the Bloc, the Greens, the Liberals, all of them jump up and fight against the carbon tax again, even though I don't like that it was repeated so many times, there's something amiss here that I'm missing. Either they're all posturing, to your point, Cypher, or this is a setup for something else that's coming. Because, I mean, let's face it, the most important damning thing so far the CPC has showed me is that the RCMP has a report saying the Canadians would revolt once they realized how broke they actually are, that they've known this and they just haven't talked about it. And for him not to bring this up repeatedly, I think he's trying to not anger and frighten Canadians and give hope. But at the same time, it just seems like the rest of the parties are not interested. I mean, they clearly see the disintegration of our economy, the housing across the country. They see the NDP pathetically clinging on to whatever vestiges of relativity they might still have after this election, because they didn't get what they wanted in pharmacare. They didn't get what they wanted in dental care. They don't get anything they really want. What they do is they settle for breadcrumbs, basically. And the fact that they're still sticking with the Liberals on this was, like, not shocking because they're pathetic. Where I'm kind of shocked and eager to hear your thoughts is why the Bloc stood up against this.
I think they knew it was going to fail, and they just didn't want to vote with the Conservatives.
Well, they wanted to be on the winning side, right? And plus, it would also be consistent with their stance on the carbon tax. So any carbon tax vote that has been had before to remove the carbon tax, they voted against it. Why? Because they don't care about anybody outside Quebec. So why should they vote in favor for it, right? Ironically, it seems to be part of their platform. Now, that's not to say that everybody in Quebec doesn't care what happens to people outside of Quebec. It's just this is the Bloc's platform, and they're gonna run with that. Now, the difference is that, and this is where people are worried, which I'm not worried. Expect the Bloc to vote against the budget. Why?
That's for damn sure. Yeah. That's for damn sure.
So that's where you will see the Conservatives and the Bloc, team up on that, and this is where it will be very interesting to see what is included and what is not in that budget. Now, the quote unquote talking heads, the experts that are on mainstream media, what they have said is that it's not a good idea for the Liberals to have a bloated budget, meaning to spend even more going into an election year, which is usually the case, by the way. And the reason for that is because you're trying to spend a whole bunch of money on quote unquote new programs to buy votes. So that would be disastrous, because what happens then? Well, you have a $60 billion deficit for this year. So if that is increased, what's going to happen? Well, the Bank of Canada is going to have to then raise interest rates on all of your voters. Again. Thereby proving what the Conservatives have been talking about this entire time, which is if you're printing money, then the Bank of Canada has to put the brakes on the inflationary car. So that's going to be a problem. The other problem is if they essentially go status quo, well, then you're just watching the ship sink. So,
And if you actually watch every time they've tabled a budget, it has been a gradual growth in costs. I have yet to see the Liberals propose a budget
and stick to
that
it.
is, and not only stick to it, but go beneath what they said.
Oh yeah, for
Right.
sure.
So he would say something like, "It's going to cost us 14 billion. This is in 2021." Ended up being 27 billion.
Yeah.
Every time they've tabled a budget, we don't have the money anymore. Now, the only reason they would do all these things is because they know they're on the out. And the only thing that I can think of, which is going to turn everybody against them, is we're literally broke. And you think you're going to spend how funny would it be, guys, if they came out with a budget of like $58 billion?
Well, you mean
Right?
580. Because remember,
Sorry, $580 billion. Like that would blow my mind. We have no money, and you think you're gonna just suddenly solve this? You have had 9 years, you've solved nothing, and now you're gonna spend more money?
and that's
I
it.
can't. I can't see at this point the voters, and I'm speaking to the voters here. Forget the CPC voters. If any Liberal or NDP voters are listening to me, we are headed to a place where you want services. It's like owning a home, but not having a car, not having food in the fridge, not having anything anymore. You just have a home. That's where they think they're taking you. Look, you have a shiny new home, but there's nothing in it. There's no furniture, there's no car, you can't go on vacations. Is this what the Liberals are pushing with the NDP, that we're going to table a budget to help Canadians, but they're all broke?
Well,
Because
and the other thing that I've seen is, so the new thing, the new thing that Jagmeet is starting to cry about is Singh demands Trudeau put in place a renters protection fund in the next budget. So, okay, what if he doesn't? Are you then going to say, oh well, we're finally done? Like,
no, and he's listen. He said at the convention explicitly. You can see it on YouTube. Anyone that looks it up, NDP convention. We are not settling for anything than universal health care plan. That's it. Everyone, even one of the leaders, came out and pretended that he was angry about this. They're trying to slither their way out of this, the Liberals, and blah 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 blah. Then they get for two or three things, and they think that's a win. You told your voters it would cover all medication, and you didn't get that because there's no realistic way to do that when you don't have the money. And forget the fact that insurance companies and pharmaceutical companies, like as if they have no brains for themselves to say, well, no, we're not going to give that to you for this amount of money. The whole thing is just such a mishmash that either people don't understand that there's not enough money in the government. This is why these taxes are all coming in. Voters need to wake up to the fact that this country, this government, and whoever they're working with is impoverishing them under the guise of like, we're helping you.
Well, and that's exactly it. I admit that as a young woman, I didn't realize that the government, like any money they had, they took from people or small businesses or corporations. I mean, you're not taught this stuff in school. So I think it's really easy to fall into the trap of, oh, well, I'm getting free money from the government. Therefore, the government has unlimited money. The government does not have unlimited money. They take it from us. And again, I don't think it's coincidence that they aren't teaching this kind of stuff in school.
well, we're unfortunately we're beyond out of time, but a very very good discussion as always, Vesper, and I'm sure this could go on for at least another hour or two, but at this point, I think we got to cut it, and but it won't be the last discussion that we have. So we'll see what happens over the next month as the budget is tabled, as the carbon tax increases, as we all adjust our lives to deal with that, and as the boundaries change for the next federal election. So all eyes are going to be on that. and we will be covering it every step of the way. But until then, thank you very much, Vesper, for being on the show.
Oh, thanks for having me, guys. As always, you guys are awesome. Keep up the great work.
Thanks very much, Vesper.